Hey everyone, this is Riddle Hacker AJ Raven. I'm here with my recap and review of the Gilded Age season number 1, episode number 5, which is titled Charity Has Two Functions, and this was another enjoyable episode. There were certain intense moments that I really liked, and yeah, if I end up coughing during making this video, please excuse me because I am dealing with certain issues and I might end up coughing randomly. But yeah, coming back, and my cat is, yeah, she wants attention. But anyway, coming back to the episode, so it opens up with Gladys and one of the maids. I think her name is Adelhain or something. And yeah, these two are working to get Gladys, to help Gladys sneak out of the house without Bertha knowing. And it kind of works, but as Gladys is walking towards the front door, this is where Bertha notices her, and Bertha's like, "Where are you going?" And Gladys is like, "Well, I'm just going out. Am I not allowed to go out?" And Bertha's like, "No, you're not, because you're going around meeting young men, corresponding with them, and all of that stuff." And Gladys is like, "Mom, if you can't let me go into society, then I'll have to find some sort of society for myself." And Bertha's like, "Go back to your room, take off that hat, and just go to your room." And yeah, Bertha is really, yeah, she has plans for Gladys, and I kind of understand where Bertha is coming from, but then again, Gladys should be allowed to have friends. She should be allowed to be friends with girls at least, girls her own age. But anyway, Mr. Russell is like, "Bertha, you need to cut our daughter some slack. She should be allowed to go out," and all of that stuff. And what is even wrong with Archie, the guy that she's corresponding with? And Bertha is like, "No, I don't want Archibald in Gladys's life. I'm working on something, and you know what? You'll see when everything works out." So we cut to Peggy and the rest of the help downstairs at the Van Ryan house, and yeah, Mrs. Armstrong is getting ready to go somewhere, and Peggy asks her about how she's doing and all of that stuff, and Mrs. Armstrong's like, "What is it to you?" And yeah, Mrs. Armstrong doesn't like Peggy. We kind of understand we kind of get to see what Mrs. Armstrong is going through in this episode, which I think the writers are trying to make her more sympathetic, but I'm like, she can at least try and not be rude to you, Peggy. But yeah, let's see where that story leads. So upstairs, Marian is talking to Aunt Agnes about going to meet Miss Burton because she's still working on opening Red Cross branches and all of that stuff. And it's going to be a good charity, and Marian likes the cause. She wants to support it. And Mrs. Fane will be there, and Marian wants to go. And this is where Agnes ends up talking about how, you know what, charity serves two purposes, because yeah, Agatha wasn't a fan of learning that Mrs. Russell was in Mrs. Fane's guest list as well. And this is where the title of the episode came from, because according to Aunt Agnes, charity serves two functions. Of course, the first function is to help those who are unfortunate and those who want help and they are in need. That's good. However, the second function is that people can use it through their donations. People can use it to climb the social ladder. And Marian is like, "So is that a bad thing?" And Agnes is like, "No, it's not a bad thing, but we should be cautious about it." And they also, I think, mentioned Mrs. Chamberlain or something. And yeah, Marian and Ada are like, "You know what? We have to change the subject and whatnot." So after what happened in the previous episode, where yeah, Peggy let Marian know about her perspective and her thought process when it came to black people, or basically people who look like Peggy, and Marian making assumptions about where Peggy's from and all of that stuff. So I was looking forward to seeing how the writers are going to allow them to be friends again, because I do like them. I do like these two as friends. So this episode kind of mended their relationship. Because Marian goes and she's like, "Peggy, was your story published and all of that stuff?" And Peggy is like, "Yeah, it was published in the newspaper." And of course, Marian is happy for her friend, and she apologizes to Peggy, and Peggy's like, "You know what, Marian, we had a falling out. Let's not make this worse. And I don't need a fairy godmother and all of that stuff. I can take care of myself. I can make my own path." And Marian is like, "Yeah, I understand. And I was like, okay, so are they not going to talk about this further? Because I think that this thing still needs to be talked about. And they do later on in the episode. So the Russells are having lunch, and this is where Berta is like, you know what, we will be inviting Archibald over, and Gladys is like, wait, you forbid me from talking to him, from seeing to him, and now seeing him, and now you're inviting him to our house. And yeah, George and Berta is like, yeah, that's exactly what's happening. And I think that Larry suspects that something's up. So Marian walks outside because she has some letters to put in the mailbox, and this is where she ends up meeting Peggy's mom. And yeah, Peggy's mom was there to meet Peggy, but Peggy was busy and all of that stuff. I think she wasn't home. So Peggy and Marian walk, and this is where Peggy's mom ends up talking to Marian about what she wants for her daughter, and that she wants her daughter to be happy, and that she's ambitious, and she can't just live her life working for the Van Ryans and living downstairs and all of that stuff. Peggy's mom basically wants her to come back home, find a husband, have children, have a proper family, and all of that stuff. And she's also like, Peggy must have told you about her father. And Marian is like, no, not necessarily. She hasn't told me anything. But yeah, this is where Marian is like, you know what, Mrs. Scott, even though I don't necessarily know what your entire family is going through, I do know this, that Peggy loves you and she really cares about you and all of that stuff. And Mrs. Scott is like, bless you for saying that, Marian. So we cut to Mrs. Armstrong, and it turns out that she has been taking care of her very old mother, and her old mother, she is a piece of work. She's basically rude towards Mrs. Armstrong and all of that stuff, and even though Mrs. Armstrong is trying to help her mother doesn't necessarily acknowledge it or is grateful and all of that stuff. And there's also a tenant, I guess. Not necessarily a tenant. Basically, there's this guy who is staying with Mrs. Armstrong's mom as well, and a part of his rent is that he needs to bring, I guess, clean water every day or whatnot. So yeah, again, as I said, maybe the writers are trying to make Mrs. Armstrong a bit sympathetic, I guess. So Marian is having tea with Mrs. Fane. And the macaroons, I really want to eat these, and the sandwiches. Oh, tasty! So yeah, and here they talk about what that they need to go and support Miss Burton's cause and all of that stuff. And this is also where Mrs. Fane tells Marian about Ward Mcallister coming to meet Berta and all of that stuff. And Ward Mcallister, he was a real person. You can look him up on Wikipedia, Google him. He basically was connected to Miss Astor, and he used to make these guest lists and all of that stuff. So this is where Megan is like, okay, I'm looking forward to meeting Mr. Mcallister, and can we invite Mr. Raikes too? And Mrs. Fane is like, yeah, let's do that. So again, we get a scene between Mrs. Armstrong and her mom, and yeah, her mom is like, you're pinching me, you're not helping me, and whatnot. So it's tough. It's tough for Mrs. Armstrong trying to take care of a mother like this one. So everyone is the aunts and Marian are having a fun day at the park, and yeah, they talk about Mrs. Fane and Mrs. Fane hosting Mr. Mcallister and all of that stuff. And Agnes knows Mr. Mcallister, Ada knows too, and they're like, you know what, he's not necessarily someone we like interacting with. And Marian is like, do you like Miss Astor? And Agnes is like, well, do you like the rain? Miss Astor is just something that all of us have to live with. And yeah, Marian doesn't mention that Mr. Raikes has been invited as well. And Agnes is like, okay, so Mrs. Russell will be there too. So let's see what happens. So we cut to downstairs at the Russell's house, and Adelaine, or whatever her name is, Adelheim. Yeah, she's very excited to possibly be Gladys's lady's maid, because she's old enough now and she doesn't need a nanny. And yeah, Miss Turner is like, what the heck are you talking about? And Adelaide is like, I know how to be a proper lady's maid. I learned by looking at you, by following you and all of that stuff. And Miss Turner, she's like, I'm not doing this. I'm not going to be your teacher or whatnot. And yeah, Mrs. Bruce is the one who supports Adelaide, and she is like, you know what, Adelaide, are you sure that you can be Gladys's lady maid? And Adelaide is like, yeah, I can do it. So we then get to see Mrs. Bruce actually talking to Gladys, and then going to talk to Berta about letting Adelaide become Gladys's lady's maid and all of that stuff. And yeah, Gladys appreciates her, because Gladys is like, you know what, Mrs. Bruce, you're the only one who has ever reached out to ask my opinion about something, and I appreciate that. And then we cut to Bertha, and yeah, she has got confirmation about meeting Mcallister. She's like, "All our dreams will be coming true soon, George." And George is like, "Well, as far as my dreams are concerned, they all came true because I'm here standing with you." And yeah, he clearly loves his wife, and I'm here for it. I am here for this power couple. So we cut to Peggy and Marian. And this is where Peggy ends up talking to Marian about what were they talking about? Oh, I forgot. Let me remember. Yes. They were talking about Mr. Raikes because Marian tells us Peggy about inviting Mr. Raikes to the dinner with Mcallister and all of that stuff. And Peggy is like, you know what? I know that you like Mr. Raikes, but he does seem to be very fond of moving around in high society and all of that stuff. And Marian is like, yeah, you're not wrong there. And yeah, Peggy is concerned because Peggy is like, well, he can't keep this up forever, right? What will happen if one day he has to let go all of this? And Marian is like, yeah, that's something that I will be thinking about. So then their conversation moves to Marian telling Peggy that her mom was there to meet her, and then she ended up having a little walk with her. And yeah, Peggy is like, you know what, my mom shouldn't have involved you in my family business. And Marian just wants Peggy to reconnect with her parents because again, Marian lost her dad, and she doesn't want Peggy to run out of time because one day her dad might not be here, and she might regret not mending the relationship. So Ada walks in, and Peggy excuses herself, and Ada is like, okay, Marian, tell me who is actually coming to the party. And this is where Marian tells Ada about the Raikes coming over, and Ada is like, be careful, Marian, don't be reckless and all of that stuff. And Marian is like, you know what? Let me make my own choices, Aunt Ada. And yeah, Aunt Ada ends up saying that love makes a fool out of all of us. And yeah, Ada is kind of trying to support Marian, but Marian needs to be careful because again, we don't necessarily know a lot about Raikes. We don't know his intentions or what he wants to do. So Mrs. Armstrong comes back, and the head cook asks if she had a good time. She's a very lucky woman, and Mrs. Armstrong's like, yeah, that's me. I'm the lucky one. So we cut to Mrs. Bruce talking to Bertha about allowing Adelheim to be Gladys's lady's maid, and Bertha is like, you know what? With you keeping an eye on Adelaide and I keeping an eye on Gladys, I think that this could work, and you will tell me if anything comes up, right? And Mrs. Bruce is like, I will tell you everything which I feel that I should be telling you. And I'm like, a play on words. So this is where George walks in, and Bertha tells George about Gladys finally getting a lady's maid. And yeah, George is like, good work, Mrs. Bruce. And yeah, Bertha is like, shouldn't I be getting some compliment as well? And he's like, okay, good work to you too. So we cut to the dinner party, or the lunch. Yeah, it's a lunch party, a little lunch tea party. And Mrs. Raikes is there. I mean, it's like, okay, Mr. Raikes, how is your conquest of New York going? And Mr. Raikes is like, well, that's not the conquest that I'm interested in. And because, yeah, he is very into Marian. And again, I'm kind of side-eyeing him now. So Bertha arrives as well. And yeah, all of them talk about how Miss Barton's new speech is going to be, I guess, in Denver or something. I'm not really sure. And yeah, it's going to be a long stay. They'll have to stay the night there. And yeah, the ladies are worried about where they'll stay and where they'll eat and whatnot. And this is where Mr. Raikes is like, you know what? Let me handle this for you because apparently I'm a tour guide as well. I'm a travel agency. But yeah, Mr. Raikes is like, let me handle this. And Bertha is like, well, can you include me in your plans? And Mr. Raikes is like, yep, I can do that. And Bertha is very happy that she'll be accompanying Miss Vane and Marian to listen to Miss Barton's speech and all of that stuff. And Mrs. Vane is happy about the fact that due to the donations that Bertha has been giving, this is a good way to get her to raise herself in society's ladder. So anyway, Ward Mcallister comes in, and he's played by, of course, the iconic Nathan Lane. And yeah, he's kind of a, I mean, you can tell that as a character, he is someone who's always looking for an opportunity, and he ends up recognizing Marian, not necessarily recognizing her, he knows her because he knows her aunts and all of that stuff, and then he ends up meeting Mr. Raikes, and he's like, Mr. Raikes, maybe one day I'll be of help to you, and Mr. Raikes is like, okay, and then he ends up meeting Bertha, Mrs. Russell, and these two kind of hit it off immediately because he's like, you know what, I want to talk about your husband's railway empire. And she's like, well, you need to talk to Mr. Raikes about it. Not Mr. Raikes, my bad. Mr. Russell about it. And yeah, Ward is like, I'm not going to talk to him. I'm going to talk to you because I need all the gossip. So we cut to downstairs at the Russell's house, and yeah, Adelaide is very, very happy that she'll finally be a lady's maid, and then they all talk about Gladys's relationship with Archibald and all of that stuff because he's coming over for dinner and all of that, and yeah, a whole lot of them have opinions, and the head person comes in and he's like, you know what, you guys need to stop talking about this. You guys have a lot of opinions, so stop it. So we cut to lunch, and yeah, again, Ward and Bertha are having a good time, and she's like, can you get me to Miss Astor and all of that stuff? And Ward is like, you know what, I'm going to help you make connections that will help you get closer to Miss Astor. And because he realizes what Bertha is doing, and he's okay with it, and Bertha is like, you see right through me as if I were glass. And Ward is like, you know what, maybe one day you'll be the one protecting me. I'm not really sure what he means by that. Maybe we'll find out later. And Marian notices, and she turns to Mr. Fane, and she's like, okay, so Bertha and Mr. Ward are doing well. And yeah, Mr. Fane is like, well, why wouldn't they? They're basically the same person. So Miss Turner is going out, and she trips, and Oscar comes in to help her, and this is a scene where, yeah, Miss Turner is like, well, you don't come around often now, right? You used to come over quite often. Why don't you come over? And Oscar is like, well, I had my issues, and Miss Turner is like, I know what the issue was. You stepped back when you thought that Mr. Russell wouldn't survive that thing with the shares and all of that stuff. And Oscar is like, yeah, I guess you caught me. And then she ends up talking about Gladys to Mr. Oscar, and yeah, she realizes that Oscar is interested in Gladys, and Oscar is like, you know what, I can use this to my advantage. And he's like, meet me at the statue in the park in an hour. I have a proposition for you. And we get to learn about that proposition later on because Miss Turner is the one who tells Oscar that Russell is very interested in Gladys marrying for love. So we cut to Agnes and Peggy is helping Agnes reply to some letters. And yeah, this is where Peggy is like, I would like to accompany Marian to Miss Barton's speech and all of that stuff. And yeah, Agnes is like, is this also part of your journalistic endeavors, huh? And Peggy is like, yep. And Agnes is like, you know what? Don't tell me too much. And yeah, then Agnes talks about how naive Marian can be, and she wants Peggy to keep an eye on her, and Peggy's like, no, I won't be spying on Marian. And Agnes was like, no, I'm not telling you to spy, I'm just telling you to make sure that she stays safe. It's different. There's a difference there. Spying and making sure someone stays safe, there's a difference there. So they arrive at Denver or somewhere. I really can't remember where they were. So Mr. Raikes is already there, and Marian is surprised because she had no idea that Mr. Raikes would be there. And yeah, this is where they're like, you know what, we have to go. We might already be late to Miss Barton's speech and all of that stuff. And this is where Marian is like, well, Peggy has to come with us because she's writing an article. And she's like, might as well bring Miss Turner with us. So when they arrive, Miss Barton is yet to give the speech, and yeah, Mrs. Morris is there. And apparently Mrs. Morris, after her husband's death, she lost her house, she lost her standing and all of that stuff. And yeah, of course she thinks that Bertha is the wife of a murderer and all of that stuff. So Bertha is focusing on Miss Barton, and this is where Mrs. Fane and Mrs. Morris talk about. Mrs. Morris is the one who tells Mrs. Fane that, you know what, you're basically ruining yourself by aligning yourself with Mrs. Russell. And Mrs. Russell is like, I heard that. But anyway, Miss Barton ends up inviting Mrs. Russell over on stage because she's very happy with all of the donations that the Russells have made. At first, Mrs. Barton was thinking of opening a single branch of the Red Cross, but because of all of the donations, she can now open 3 branches. So yeah, the Russells are really in this cause. So yeah, she ends up giving her speech and all of that stuff, and Berta is there, and of course the newspapers are going to pick this up. And once the speech is done, Peggy ends up coming in with a bunch of questions, and she asks about how the Red Cross will operate and if they will offer their services to everyone despite race. And of course, Miss Burton is like, of course, that's what we do. And then it's time for them to go inside and see the work that the Red Cross has been doing. And yeah, this is where Mrs. Morris is like, is Peggy going to come with us? Because she's already surprised that Peggy is also working as a secretary for Agnes. And yeah, she's basically being racist. There's no other way to put it. And of course, Miss Burton overhears her, and Miss Burton is like, Miss Peggy, would you like to accompany us? And of course, Peggy goes with them. And then the women end up seeing these patients getting treated, these burn victims. And yeah, I think Berta is a bit squeamish. And Mrs. Morris notices that, and Mrs. Morris is like, So she can give a whole lot of money, but she can't necessarily stand the sight of people who she's helping, huh? She wants to keep on giving money from far away. And yeah, this is where Mrs. Fane is like, well, I do hope that you don't pick a fight with Mrs. Russell. It won't end well for you. And yeah, Mrs. Morris is like, no, I'm going to get my revenge. So let's see if that's even possible. So everyone is having dinner, and this is where Mrs. Russell excuses herself because Berta is like, well, I have to go home because I have a guest that I need to entertain. So it was a good meeting, so bye-bye. And Miss Burton is like, well, thank you for all of your donations, and I also thank Mr. Russell. So as she walks away, oh yeah, Peggy is in her room working on the article. So after she walks away, this is where Miss Barton ends up telling Marian and Mrs. Fane that she understands what kind of woman that Berta is, and that she is the type of woman who uses donations and charity in order to climb the social ladder. And yeah, Miss Burton is okay with it because all of the money that the Russells are giving, she's helping actual people. So yeah, she's okay. And then she ends up talking about whether or not the ladies know Mrs. Chamberlain. And yeah, this is where Marian is like, yeah, I know. And yeah, basically Miss Burton wants to connect with Miss Chamberlain because she wants her donations and all of that stuff. And Marian is like, you know what, I'll talk to her. And Mrs. Fane is like, your aunts are going to like this. So it's time for all of them to say goodnight, and Mr. Raikes ends up walking Marian to her room, and I'm like, Marian, don't do it, because yeah, Mr. Raikes is like, well, I'll bid you goodbye, I guess. And Marian is like, what do you mean, I guess? What were you thinking would happen? And of course, Mr. Raikes is flirting with Marian. He wants to kiss her and whatnot. And I'm like, don't do it, Marian, don't do it. But no, they do kiss. And while they're kissing, Peggy walks in, and Peggy ends up breaking the kiss, and Mr. Raikes excuses herself, and Marian is like, what the heck just happened? Peggy is like, yeah, that's what I'm wondering. What the heck just happened? What did you just do? And yeah, Marian liked the kiss. You can tell that she liked the kiss because she likes Mr. Raikes, and she is like, Peggy, were you ever in love? And yeah, Peggy is like, I was. His name was Ilias. He was like a stock boy at my father's pharmacy, and we fell in love, but my father didn't approve and all of that stuff. And Marian is like, okay, Peggy, I'm not really sure if I should be offended, or if I should take Mr. Raikes' advancements towards me as a compliment. And Peggy is like, well, if you think that he thinks that he can have you easily, then be offended. But if you want him as much as he wants you, then enjoy it, girl. So moving on, we cut to Oscar with his boyfriend, and yeah, this is where Oscar ends up telling his boyfriend that he ended up bribing Miss Turner. Basically, he will be giving Miss Turner some money in order for her to spy for him on Berta and Gladys and all of that stuff. And yeah, Oscar's boyfriend is like, yeah, let's see how that pans out. So, of course, Mr. Boudoir, or whatever his name is, he ends up noticing that Miss Turner is quite cheery now because she was quite down the past few weeks. And yeah, Miss Turner is like, well, I took your advice. You're the one who told me that if I want to stay here, that I should change things. And yeah, I have decided to change things. So we cut to Agnes, Ada, and Marian having tea. Barrister is there as well. And yeah, this is where they talk about Miss Burton's charity again. And Marian is like, what's up with you and change, Miss Aunt Agnes? And Aunt Agnes is like, you know what, I like change. I don't disapprove of change, but I do like change to be slow. And she basically likes things changing slowly, basically. So we cut to downstairs, and yeah, it's time for Archibald to come over for dinner, and everyone excited because they're like, you know what, the fact that Berta ended up inviting him for dinner means that she's okay with Gladys marrying him one day or whatnot. And yeah, the head person is like, don't be so fooled quickly, because Miss Russell, from what I know, Mrs. Russell plays the long game. So Marian ends up reading the article about Miss Burton that Peggy wrote, and she likes it. She's like, you know what, you captured her perfectly, and I really like your writing and all of that stuff. And yeah, this is where these two talk about what transpired between these two in the previous episode, which again I appreciated, because I was like, you know what, you two need to talk about this again. And she does, because Marian again apologizes, and she's like, you need to understand, because I haven't ever met a woman like you. And Peggy is like, what do you mean a woman like me? You haven't met someone black? And Marian's like, no, that's not what I meant. It's just that I haven't met women like you, which means that you and Miss Burton, who end up creating their own paths and whatnot, from the town that I'm from, women just accept their roles as daughters and sisters and mothers. And yeah, I was just very interested in seeing where you came from in your house and whatnot. And yeah, so these two have mended their friendship, and yeah, I like it. And again, Peggy sits down, and this is where Marian tells Peggy to not let time slip away, and that she doesn't necessarily have a lot of time, and that she should mend her relationship with her father. And Peggy is like, well, Marian, you don't understand the pressure that I'm in. And yeah, before she can tell Marian what happened between her and her father, she walks away, and I'm like, what the heck happened? Did he have Ilyas killed? Did he end up forcing them to divorce each other? Did Peggy give birth to a child that Peggy's dad gave away? I'm not really sure what's happening here. I need to know. So we cut to dinner with Archibald, and Bertha is warming up to him, but it's all part of a plan. It's all part of a plan, because even Archibald is like, yeah, Ward Mcallister, my parents know him, so it's time for them to have drinks. And Bertha excuses herself, and she's like, Gladys, come with me. And Larry decides to stay back with George and Archibald, and Bertha's like, if you need a drink, you'll have a drink with us. So basically, she wants Archibald to be alone with Mr. Russell. And while that's happening, Mr. Russell's secretary or right-hand man ends up getting an emergency telegram, and he's like, you know what, I have to go. I have to run and tell Mr. Russell about this. So the interaction between Mr. Russell and Archibald, that was a very, very intense, well-written interaction. Basically, even though Archibald likes Gladys and he wants to marry her, his intentions are pure, I guess. Mr. Russell is like, let me give you an offer. So the offer that Mr. Russell ends up giving Archibald is that there are two options for Archibald. He can go ahead and he can start working with this very huge financial firm. And if he accepts, but in order for him to accept such an offer, he has to break up with Gladys. And the other option is that if he refuses to take the first option, then Mr. Russell will make it very tough for Archibald to continue his journey as a business professional, a financial advisor or whatnot, an investor. And yeah, basically Archibald is now stuck in a rock and a hard place, because Mr. Russell doesn't want him to communicate with Gladys anymore, and he only has two options, and it's not a win-win situation for him. And Archibald is like, what the heck just happened? So he goes and talks to Gladys, and he's like, Gladys, you're a very, very wonderful woman, and I highly doubt that I'll ever meet a woman like you ever in my life, but I have to go. And Gladys is like, what the heck? What's wrong? And Archibald, he keeps on looking at Mr. and Mrs. Russell, and Bertha's like, did you do what I asked you to do? And our George is like, yep, it's all done. And Archibald ends up excusing himself after breaking up with Bertha. I guess he took Mr. Russell's offer, and at least he'll be rich. I guess he's young. He's like, 24, 25. He'll find another woman. And Larry is like, what did you do? And Bertha's like, what do you mean, what did we do? And Larry is like, I know you guys, okay? And I appreciated the fact that Larry realizes what kind of games that his parents play. And also, talking about Larry, I actually wasn't expecting him to have so much limited time with Marian. I actually thought that there was going to be some sort of love triangle between Marian, Russell, and Larry. Not necessarily a love triangle, because in order for it to be a proper love triangle, everyone has to have a crush on everyone. But yeah, basically these two wanting to be closer to Marian and Marian having to choose between these two. But yeah, the fact that he hasn't been interacting with Marian, it came as a surprise to me, because I kind of like these two together. So while they're talking, George's second right-hand man comes in, and he's like, "This is an emergency. I need to talk to you." And then he ends up telling George that one of his trains ended up going off track. There are casualties, there are injuries, 3 men are dead. And George is like, "What about the women and children?" And he's like, "Well, we're still waiting on the details." So Bertha ends up talking to Gladys about what she did and why she did it. And Gladys is like, "What do you want from me, Mom? What do you want?" And Bertha is like, "Well, I want you to have the entire world, and I'm going to do everything in my power in order for you to get it." And Bertha's like, "You know what, excuse me, I have to go and talk to your father and see what the emergency is about." And Larry sits down with his sister, and he's like, "I can help you. I can go to Archibald's office tomorrow and I can talk to him." And yeah, Gladys is like, "What next? What then? What the heck do you think will happen then? Our parents won't allow this." And yeah, Larry can't help his sister. So the episode ends with basically Bertha, George, and George's right-hand man, I think his name is Richard, I'm not really sure, trying to figure out how they're going to handle this emergency, because George is like, a crash like this, that can really damage the company, the entire company, so we have to handle this. And Bertha's like, "Can I help?" And George is like, "Yup, send telegram to Miss Burton right now. Ask her to come to Pennsylvania. I think because it's in Pennsylvania or somewhere where the railway crash occurred." And he's like, "Yep, we can use Miss Burton right now. Ask her to come." And Richard is like, "You know what, I'll handle the press news coverage." And George is like, "Yep, let's do this. Let's handle this, because this entire situation can take us down." And Bertha's like, "No, you won't let it happen." And this is where the episode ended. And I think the first season is going to have 9 episodes, so 4 more episodes left. Another enjoyable episode. And again, as far as Marian and Mr. Raikes is concerned, I've started to side-eye Mr. Raikes. I started to side-eye him. But yeah, let's see what happens. Let me know what you thought of the episode down in the comment section below. And until next time, stay happy, stay safe, stay blessed. See you guys later.